Oh boy! Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh, he's here again. Something is spamming this. What's going on here? And Hector's here again. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind, and this time we're just playing tanks. So you'd think we get a lot of variety, but at some point it takes quite a turn. That said, starting with Duty 1, we went to Rathalos Extreme as Paladin, and Ilana is here. Phase 1 goes relatively smoothly, with me being hit once, but as the tank, that isn't super concerning. We clear the ads and Garula with relative ease. Going into Phase 2, our Dragoon, who is both a mentor but also a legend, seems to sort of insist on helping with the stacks. When they help me, I just kind of ignore it and do my own thing. But when they help Ilana, they get confused and try to run away with it, which then distracts Ilana just enough that they forget to heal for the next hit and die as a result. Our Bard also ends up dying to simply not realizing potion is needed in the first place, but helping them wouldn't do anything in such a scenario anyway. Despite this, we still make it through. Now, after Ilana had trouble due to being chased, the Dragoon told them not to run away, and Ilana and I promptly told them not to help. I somewhat recently put out a video about the silent language of boss fights, and indeed, if the stack marker runs away from you, whether intentional or not, it kinda signals, let me take it alone. And indeed, assuming you know to potion it up, you can easily take all 3 stacks alone as long as your gear is decent. Despite being 1 death from wiping, we still managed to push through relatively easily. For Duty 2, we went to Ifrit Extreme as Dark Knight, with Ilana again. For about half the fight, things are smooth, but during the second set of nails, the Dragoon goes down to being caught in the Tankbuster flamethrower, promptly followed by the Viper getting caught by some searing winds. We mostly recover leading into the final set of nails, and then the Viper dies to choosing to take specifically the nail in front of the boss, the Bard and the Black Mage die to a combination of AoE damage, culminating in a 3rd nail explosion. My co-tank is holding on for dear life, which results in me dying to being overwhelmed by Tankbusters. Right as my co-tank dies, I get back up to stabilize Ifrit again, and the Dragoon dies to what appears to be damage from the chains. Then the Viper dies from nail explosions, and the Black Mage dies from searing winds. However, we do survive the final nail phase, even with one of the healers dying to radiant plumes. We can write this one out with no more things that should be able to take us all down. Very cursed and chaotic, but as I've said before, you have way more time than you think on that final nail phase. For Duty 3, we have a bit of a cameo of cameos as Gunbreaker, and Gazel is here. And by most of us holding our damage, we actually managed to one-cycle the cameos with no respawns. Amazing! For Duty 4, we went to Worqor Zormor. This run was pretty slow overall, but there were 2 standout players as to why that might be. Throughout the duty, it seemed like the Reaper exclusively used 1 application of Death's Design just before bursting. Sometimes, but otherwise, not really, leading to a ton of lost damage. This is, by the way, just the most obvious mistake, and from there we may be able to assume that a lot of other mistakes are being made too without looking closely. However, some of the chat did look closely, and we can observe that on most AoE pulls, the Reaper is running around single-targeting enemies one by one. Next, the Sage spent a large part of AoE pulls just spamming E-Diag and maintaining their AoE dot. Maybe a Toxicon here and there. Now, the thing is, looking at what is happening, the E-Diags don't seem unnecessary at a glance. The problem is that the Sage isn't using most of their toolkit, as I don't think I saw single Aetherochemical or Fizzes on AoE pulls at all. This is a mistake or misunderstanding some healers make, of refusing to use an AoE healing option if only one person needs it, even if the option is the perfect answer to the situation. For instance, Aetherochemical heals for only slightly less than Ryucholi on a single target, but the damage reduction easily makes up for it. There's also a ton of other examples, but the main takeaway tip here for any learning healers is that sometimes the reason you feel like you need to spam heal the tank is because you're overlooking some other tool in your arsenal. We of course still cleared with no wipes. For duty 5, we went to Within the Bootstraps as warrior. The only thing you can really do here is set it up so you can get 2 maims in your berserk, and then just get on those 1-2s. And then for duty 6, we went to Tam-Tara Deepcroft. Dragoon, unfortunately, has no AoE, and as it turns out in this party, our Thaumaturge is still learning the basics, so they don't contribute a huge amount on the AoE either. But that's fine, they're still learning. Now, I packed my high potions, which offer the best healing per second at this HP amount, and Astrologian is kinda cracked at this level anyway, and we're off to the races. I pull massively to increase the speed of the run as much as possible, and at certain points I make mild use of kiting to give the Astrologian some breathing room to heal me as needed, and we get through very fast, all things considered. A tip that came up during this dungeon was in regards to sprinting, as some players are not sure how to make the most of it. First off, running 30% faster, which is what sprint does, means the enemies you're rounding up will get less free hits in on you while you are pulling, so sprint represents defensive value. Second, if you're the tank, sprint about a second before you enter combat to get the full 20 seconds of sprint. If sprint is on cooldown, you can just sprint when it is available during the pull process. If you know the dungeon well, you can sprint sooner if it is necessary to make sure you have sprint for the next pull. Additionally, sometimes simply sprinting when you see your healer, or even DPS, do it can also work. As a healer, or DPS, preferably sprint when the tank does, or 1 second before you enter combat if the tank doesn't seem to do it. And finally, some tanks are worried they will outrun the healer and so die due to a lack of heals. While this can happen, if you are sprinting, you will take way less damage, which might make this issue non-existent. And if you do run into trouble, just do like a curve at the end of the hallway and kite back around and run towards your healer. It's a bit like the healing tip for Worqor Zormor. The reason you might feel this fear is because you're not using other tools effectively. Next, for duty 7, we went to Urth as Paladin, with Ilana. The whole run goes excellent, with all the turrets being dealt with on Hydras. The strict pair stack is done correctly on Hamachis, and on the final boss, the team even survives the ins and outs. And then, during the universal manipulation, everyone gets into a perfectly safe position, and then at the very last moment, one of our machinists just slides straight into my area and promptly dies. I wasn't even moving. We of course recover and make it through the final intermission, but at the last, the same machinist dies to the ins and outs, just as the boss dies too. It's still cleared pretty fast though. And then things take a turn. For duty 8 through 12, we went to pushing Pepper Possums as Dark Knight, and for 3 of these 5 runs, we even landed in the same duty as Hector, you know, the guy with the boss guides. I didn't even know we were on the same data center. Now, as a tank, since none of the tanks really have any defining features at this level, all you can really do is maximize your damage on the boss while picking up all the adds and moving out of the poison clouds. What is important to note here is that frequently a random player, I think it is a totally random player, but it might be just not the tank, will be targeted for the poison clouds. So one thing you can do as a ranged job is to hang extra far back to bait the clouds away from melee to help the tank and any possible melees get extra uptime. The main issue for tanks picking up the adds is that they might not directly enter combat with the tank, and if they don't, then you have to hit them to do so. However, if any of the enemies do naturally target the tank first, so you're already in combat with them, simply flipping your tank stance off and on again generates enough buff enmity that as long as no one else hits them, you should be good. 5 of the same Guildhests in a row. Wow! And then for duty 13, we went to Halatali. All things considered, the run was actually pretty fast. One of the things to consider is that during the whole bit with the winches, no one really helped me with them. So we had to slowly clear a pack to then use the winch and then over to the next pack. We made up the lost time, quote unquote, by simply pulling big everywhere else, of course. Remember, if you're not the tank, you can push the duty along faster by being the one to use the winches. The reason a tank can't do it is because being hit cancels it. For duty 14, we went to Hostile Discos as Gunbreaker. A very minor tank tip here is that the monkeys that spawn behind you spawn immediately when the boar is pulled, so as a tank, you can pile them together much faster by ranged pulling the boar and running back immediately. Who's to say whether it is faster though, since you will still have to run further to get back on track after clearing them all. For duty 15, we went to Dispellable Debuff Derby. The fastest possible way to run this is to just run all the packs up to the boss. Despite that, I tend to prefer to clear the packs before the boss, because once the boss fight starts, you're in a mild race against time to kill the boss before the waves of ads overwhelm you. So it might be just better to get rid of all the packs before the boss to make things a bit easier. For duty 16, we went to Stone Vigil. I very quickly clocked that this might very well be the Sage's very first duty as Sage, due to some of the quirks of the way they play. They are not really using E-Diag, but very much use regular Diag. They sometimes used E-Doses. The strongest sign to me that they are new to the job was how it seems like they gradually introduced buttons throughout the duty. In the first third, they relied hard on diagnosis. In the second third, I saw Soteria and a more brave choice to attack, while diagnosis was an option, and in the last third, they made use of Physis for healing just me. On my end, I never go full pull with a random healer if they don't outright request it, but once I clocked that they were less experienced, I toned it down slightly. I mean, I still pulled 2 packs, but still. The important advice here is to work with what you actually have instead of working as if you have what you wish you had. For duty 17, we went to Popping Pokey Plants as Warrior. Sadly, no Hector this time. Cleared up same as before. For duty 18, we went to Odin, and Naya the Monk and Isk the Pictomancer knew me. Hello! We make sure to chase every Sangatile with the defensive, and aim to optimize each Berserk as much as we can. 1 Storm's Path or Eye, and 1 or 2 Inner Beasts. But that's all we can really do. A tip if we were to end up in a party that has issues with the DPS check at the end is to hold whatever you have. The only real timer in this fight is that final DPS check, so casually sauntering towards it to hold your resources for the final rush is a strategy. For duty 19 and 20, we went to Sylvan Silence Seekers as Paladin. In both of these runs, we pull the packs all the way to the boss to try and ignore them as much as possible. After all, nothing else matters for clearing the duty. Dealing with the packs before the boss is just a safety measure. For duty 21, we went to Qitana Ravel. Overall, the duty went really well, especially considering I think the healer was a first timer. There were some issues on the first boss though, so let's talk a bit about that. Whenever the boss uses Lozadal's Scorn, pay attention to the statues in the back. That side will be cleaved with the glowing eyes. Similarly, when the boss uses Heat Up, pay attention to which arm is charged up. Of course, when the two overlap, the boss will always cleave in such a way that there is a safe bit of the safe half that it will not cleave. That is it really. There's also other AoEs, but those 2 things are what really matter. Most importantly for non-tanks, if all else fails, make sure you at least only get hit by one of them. So if you're having trouble with the boss phasing, at least be in the half where the statue is not cleaving. And then for duty 22 to 27, we went to actual Armor Andes as Dark Knight. And we met some friends here, although not much of interest happened. A lot of 1-2ing. Dark Knight is in a particularly awkward spot as they don't have a damage buff at all at this level, while all the other tanks do. And finally for duty 28, we went to Shiva Extreme. In the first attempt, things go alright in phase 1, but I realize my co-tank is using Provoke rotationally, so we address that immediately. In phase 2, we immediately wipe to bow. After going over some tactics, we get back in for attempt 2, where everything goes well in phase 1. Entering phase 2, I've carefully managed my enmity so I can forcibly tank switch when needed with Shirk. This way, I tank the sword in phase 1 and have my co-tank take the staff in phase 2. This goes well, but then the wind appears in the ground and 3 of us forget to not move and get frozen. By an absolute miracle, Shiva chases my co-tank to the wall and points the bow into it, making most of the arena safe. We do manage to recover with only my co-tank dying though. The third weapon turns out to be sword, which we also manage to handle nicely, although a few players get cubed again from the ice floor that comes immediately after. Unfortunately, in my attempt to help with said cubes, I end up pointing Glacier Bash at our bard that promptly dies as a result. But we managed to wrap it up with everyone still alive. Well done, team. Nearly 2/3 Guildhests is quite wild, but of course not even close to the record. I do feel sticking to a specific role category without sticking to a specific job keeps what happens in duties a bit varied, while still keeping some focus on a specific topic, like tanking. Now, that said, we are one duty short of being 11/20ths of the way to the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Shadowbringers, tanks didn't have access to their tank stances until level 30. This was particularly brutal for paladins initially, who didn't get access to their tank stance until level 40 in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward.